Welcome to the QuickPro camera guide for the Pentax KS1. This guide is meant to be a study tool to be used in connection with and not a replacement of your camera's owner's manual. The KS1 is a great camera that will capture amazing images as well as HD video. Let's get started. Your KS1 has many sophisticated buttons and dials, and to take the best pictures with your camera, you want to be familiar with the functions of each of them. Let's begin by taking a closer look at many of the camera's features. First, there is the main switch and shutter release button. To take a picture, simply rotate the main switch to on, press and hold the shutter button halfway down for a moment to allow the camera to focus, and press it the rest of the way down to take the picture. This button has two functions. First, it is the exposure compensation button. When you're shooting in the program auto, sensitivity priority, shutter priority, or aperture priority modes, you can use this button in conjunction with the E dial to adjust the overall brightness of the image. This button also serves as the AV button. When you're shooting in the shutter and aperture priority or manual modes, this button will allow you to toggle between adjusting the aperture and shutter speed values. This is the green button, which will allow you to reset the value that is being adjusted, switch to ISO auto, or you can assign a specific function to this button. This is the hot shoe, which will allow you to attach an optional flash unit to the camera. This is the built-in flash. Now let's take a look at this side of the camera. This is the flash pop-up button. To make the flash pop up, simply press this button. This is the microphone, which will record sound during movie mode. Take care not to cover the microphone during movie recording. This is the focus mode switch, which will allow you to choose between automatic and manual focus. Now let's take a look at this side of the camera. This is the lens release button. When you want to remove a lens, press the lens release button while holding the camera with the same hand, and then with the other hand, rotate the lens until it uncouples. Avoid changing lenses in windy or dusty conditions. This will help the image sensor stay clean and free of dust. To attach a lens, make sure that the camera is switched to off. Hold the camera with one hand and the lens with the other, like this. Align the lens's index with the camera's index, then gently rotate the lens until it clicks into place. Take great care not to scratch the lens by allowing it to make contact with anything. This is the AF assist light, which will help the camera to autofocus in low light conditions. This is the speaker, which plays back sound during movie playback. These are the grip lamps, which will illuminate when the camera is powered on and serve as a countdown timer during self-timer mode. This is the remote control receiver, which will allow the camera to communicate with an optional remote. This is the terminal cover, where you'll find the HDMI and USB terminals. The HDMI terminal will allow you to connect the camera to an HD television, and the USB terminal will allow you to connect the camera to a computer or compatible printer. Now let's take a look at the bottom of the camera. This is the camera's tripod socket. Here you'll find the battery and memory card slot cover. Your KS1 can accept SD, SDHC, and SDXC memory cards. When you're inserting a memory card, you'll want to make sure that the manufacturer's logo is facing the back of the camera. Simply insert the card until it clicks into place and close the card slot cover. Before you start taking pictures with a new memory card, it's a good idea to format it. Also keep in mind that your camera will operate faster if you periodically format your memory card, rather than simply deleting images from it to free up space for more picture taking. Make sure that you don't format your card unless you've already copied the images that you want to save to your computer. Formatting your card will erase all the images. To format a memory card, press the menu button and use the camera's four-way controller to navigate to the fourth setup menu, indicated by a wrench icon with the number 4 highlighted. Select the Format option and press OK. Select Format and press OK again. Now let's take a look at the back of the camera. The most prominent feature is the large LCD monitor. This screen serves several purposes. First, it displays images that have been taken. After the playback button is pressed, you can use the camera's four-way controller to scroll through the images on the memory card. Second, when the Info button is pressed, the LCD monitor provides fast and easy access to several of the camera's settings in the control panel. Third, when the Menu button is pressed, the LCD monitor displays the camera's menu system, where you can change many important settings in the camera. Finally, when the Live View button is pressed, the LCD screen provides a live view of the scene. Directly above the LCD monitor is the viewfinder, where you can see camera settings when you're taking pictures. Before you start taking pictures, you'll want to focus the viewfinder. To do this, use the diopter adjustment lever located above the eye cup. Simply slide the lever until the viewfinder is in sharp focus. At the bottom of the viewfinder display, you can see the flash indicator when the flash is being used, the shutter speed, aperture setting, focus indicator, and ISO setting. Over the scene, you'll see the AF frame, where the AF points are located. This is the spot metering frame. When the camera uses autofocus, the AF points that achieve focus will light. This button has two functions. First, it is the Live View button, which will allow you to use the camera's live view shooting mode. This button also serves as the Delete button in the playback mode. This is the Playback button. Pressing this button will allow you to view your images on the LCD monitor. This is the Menu button. Pressing this button will allow you to access the camera's sophisticated menu system. This is the E-dial. In the shooting modes, you can rotate this dial to make adjustments to exposure settings like aperture and shutter speed. When the menu system is displayed, you can rotate this dial to scroll to the next menu tab. When the control panel is displayed, you can use the E-dial to adjust camera settings. And in the playback mode, the E-dial serves as the Playback Magnify Thumbnail control. This is the AF-AEL button. You can simply press the button to immediately activate the autofocus, just like pressing the shutter button halfway. Then you can hold the button down to lock the focus and exposure while you recompose the image. This is the Info button. Pressing this button will toggle through the different information displays in the shooting mode. And pressing this button in conjunction with the four-way controller will allow you to choose the information display in the playback mode. This is the memory card access lamp, which indicates when the memory card is being read or written to. Do not remove the battery or memory card when the access lamp is lit. This is the mode dial. To change the camera's shooting mode, simply rotate the mode dial. You can choose from P or Program Auto, SV or Sensitivity Priority, TV or Shutter Priority, AV or Aperture Priority, TAV or Shutter and Aperture Priority, M or Manual Exposure, B or Bulb Exposure, the Effect mode with 10 different special effect settings, the Scene mode with almost 20 different scene options, and the Auto mode. We'll discuss the camera's shooting modes in greater detail later in this guide. As discussed, this is the camera's four-way controller. It is used to navigate the menu system, scrolling through images in playback, and adjusting settings in the control panel. Each of the buttons on the four-way controller also have dedicated functions. The top button is the ISO button, which also allows you to select the camera's ISO settings. This button on the four-way controller is the Flash Mode button, where you can choose the flash mode for the built-in flash, as well as adjust the flash exposure compensation. The bottom button is the White Balance button, which provides access to the camera's white balance settings and options. This button is the camera's Drive Mode button, where you can select the drive mode. This is the OK button, which is used to confirm selections in the camera's menu system and control panel. In the camera's live view and movie modes, the OK button also serves as the focus magnifier button. Your KS1 has a variety of image quality and size settings that will allow you to capture images with resolution, file format, and compression that you need for your scenario. The Pentax KS1 can record image files in two different file types, RAW and JPEG. First, there is the RAW setting. RAW files are not actually image files. They're actually the raw data saved to the memory card directly from the image sensor. This means that RAW files must be processed on the computer before they're printed. Next, RAW file sizes are considerably larger than JPEG files. RAW files have a much broader range of tones. Shadow and highlight areas have more detail than other image files, and you can extensively edit RAW files without losing image data. The other image quality setting on the KS1 is JPEG. JPEG files are a standard compressed file format that is supported by any image software. Because JPEG files are compressed, the file sizes are very small compared to RAW image files, but they also have a much narrower range of tones and will lose some image data each time they are saved. Let's take a look at how to select the image file type, resolution, and quality settings on the KS1. The fastest method is to use the control panel. Simply press the Info button to bring up the control panel. From this screen, select the File Format option. You can rotate the E dial to make your selection, or you can press OK to view the options. Here you can choose from JPEG, RAW, and RAW plus JPEG. When JPEG or RAW are selected, the camera will record one JPEG or RAW image file each time a picture is taken. When RAW plus JPEG is selected, the camera will record one RAW file and one JPEG file each time a picture is taken. The next option in the control panel is JPEG Recorded Pixels, which will allow you to choose the number of megapixels you would like the camera to use when recording JPEG images. The first and default option is the large 20 megapixel setting. You can also choose from the medium 12 megapixel setting, the small 6 megapixel setting, and the extra small 2 megapixel setting. Unless I know that I'll only be using the images for posting online, I like to keep the camera set to the large 20 megapixel setting. Note that when RAW images are recorded, the full 20 megapixel resolution will always be used. Another important setting is the JPEG quality. This is also accessed in the control panel. You can choose from 3 levels of quality. The resolution will not be affected by the JPEG quality setting. The difference between the 1, 2, and 3-star options is the level of compression. Images taken with the 3-star setting will have the least compression, largest JPEG file sizes, and will be the highest quality. Images taken with a 1-star setting will have the most compression, smallest JPEG file sizes, and will have the lower quality. The KS1 also allows you to customize the file format for the RAW images. This is done in the menu system. Simply press the menu button and select the first record mode menu. Here, select Image Capture Settings and RAW File Format. You can choose from PEF, which is the original Pentax RAW file format, or you can choose DNG, a standard RAW file format. One of the most important concepts in photography is exposure, or the amount of light that falls on the camera's image sensor. A properly exposed photo will have good detail in the shadow, midtone, and highlight areas. Photos that are too bright are overexposed, and photos that are too dark are underexposed. The camera uses metering modes to determine proper exposure settings. There are 3 different metering modes on the KS1. To select a metering mode, press the Info button to bring up the control panel. Here, use the 4-way controller to scroll to the AE metering option. You can rotate the E dial to quickly make your selection, or you can press OK to view the options. The first metering mode is called multi-segment metering. This is a great general use metering mode that can be used in most shooting scenarios. The camera sets the exposure automatically to suit the scene. This is a good mode to use for many situations, but sometimes when the scene is very bright or very dark, you may want to use a different metering mode. The next mode is center-weighted metering. This is a classic metering mode used for portraits. Center-weighted metering will evaluate the entire frame and assign the greatest weight to the center area. The last metering mode is spot metering. This is a great mode to use when there's a lot of contrast between the background and the subject, when the background is either very bright or very dark, or when the subject is very small in the frame. This metering mode will meter off the spot metering frame at the center of the viewfinder. Now that you know a little about how your camera sees and measures light to create properly exposed photos, let's talk a little about the shooting modes on the KS1. Your camera shooting modes allow you to take the most creative control over the camera's settings like aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, flash, as well as a variety of other settings. To select a shooting mode, simply rotate the mode dial. With the Auto Scene and Effects mode, the camera chooses everything for you. All you'll need to do is point and shoot. The sophisticated Auto mode on the KS1 will assess the scene and automatically switch to an appropriate picture mode for optimal results. To take a picture in Auto mode, simply press the shutter button halfway to allow the camera to focus. The focus point or points that achieved focus will briefly blink in red in the viewfinder, and the focus confirmation indicator will appear. Then simply press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. The next setting on the mode dial is Scene. The KS1 has many different scene modes that will help you capture great images in almost any scenario. To access the scene modes, rotate the mode dial to Scene. The scene mode options will be displayed on the LCD. When the information display is shown on the LCD, you can simply rotate the E dial to select a different scene mode. To view all of the scene mode options when the information display is shown on the LCD, press the Info button to access the control panel. Then simply select the scene mode option. There is a scene mode for Portrait, Landscape, Macro, Moving Object, Night Scene Portrait, Sunset, Blue Sky, Forest, Night Scene HDR, Night Snap, Food, Pet, Kids, Surf and Snow, Backlight Silhouette, Candlelight, Stage Lighting, and Museum. The KS1 also features a unique effects mode where you can take photos with a variety of special effects. To access the effects mode, simply rotate the mode dial to Effect. The options are shown on the LCD monitor and can be selected by rotating the E dial or by using the four-way controller. Like the scene modes, the effect modes can also be selected from the information display screen when the E dial is rotated, and they can be viewed and selected from the control panel when the Info button is pressed. When any of the effects modes are selected, you can press the bottom four-way controller button to make adjustments to the intensity of the effect. You can choose from 10 different effect modes, including Faded Color, which will give the image a muted color tone, Clear Tone, which will give the image a crisp, clean look, Brilliant Color, which will capture vivid colors, Unicolor Bold, which will allow you to choose one color to be visible in the image while the other colors are black and white, Vintage Color, which will give the image an aged look, Cross Processing, which will capture images with a retro look with intense colors, Warm Fade, which will give the image a warm faded look, Bold Monochrome, which will capture high contrast black and white images, Infrared Filter, which will capture black and white images that mimic the look of infrared photos, and Vibrant Color Enhance, which will give the image a saturated, vibrant look. Now let's take a look at the more advanced shooting modes on the KS1. The first mode is called Program AE and is represented with a P on the mode dial. In this mode, the camera automatically adjusts shutter speed and aperture for optimal exposure. But you can change the aperture and shutter speed combinations to suit your needs. To operate in this mode, rotate the mode dial to select P. Press the shutter button halfway down to focus and the rest of the way down to take the picture. You may find that the shutter speed is too slow for what you're photographing, or that the aperture does not give you the depth of field that you're looking for. If you'd like to change the camera's shutter speed and aperture combination, simply rotate the E dial. Rotate the dial to the left for large aperture openings and fast shutter speeds, and rotate the dial to the right for small aperture openings and slow shutter speeds. The next shooting mode is the SV, or Sensitivity Priority mode. In this mode, you can simply rotate the E dial to quickly select the ISO setting, and the camera will automatically select an appropriate shutter speed and aperture combination for proper exposure. This is a great mode to use for times when you need to have continual control over the ISO setting. The next shooting mode is the TV, or Shutter Priority mode. The Shutter Priority mode is useful for times when you want to control motion in a scene, whether it's freezing action or blurring the motion of the subject. In this mode, you'll set the shutter speed and the camera will automatically select an appropriate aperture value for proper exposure. To use the camera in Shutter Priority mode, set the mode dial to TV. Rotate the E dial to select the shutter speed. The Pentax KS1 has shutter speeds that range from very slow, 30 full seconds, to very fast, 1/6000th of a second. You can view the shutter speed and aperture values on the information display or through the camera's viewfinder. The next shooting mode is the AV, or Aperture Priority mode. The Aperture Priority mode is useful for times when you want to control the depth of field in an image. Depth of field is the term used to describe the distance between the nearest and farthest objects in a scene that appear acceptably sharp in an image. When only a small area or subject in an image is in focus, it's said to have a shallow depth of field. This effect is achieved by using a smaller f-stop number. When everything in both the foreground and background is in focus, an image is said to have a long depth of field. For a long depth of field, choose a large f-stop number. When you're shooting in Aperture Priority mode, you'll set the aperture and the camera will automatically select the correct shutter speed for proper exposure. To use this mode, rotate the mode dial to select AV, rotate the E dial to select an aperture value as you watch the display on the information display or through the viewfinder. Once you've made your selection, press the shutter button halfway to focus and the rest of the way to take the picture. The next mode on the KS1 is the TAV, or the Shutter and Aperture Priority mode. In this mode, you will have control over the shutter speed and aperture settings, and the camera will automatically select an appropriate ISO setting for proper exposure. To use this mode, simply rotate the mode dial to TAV. Then rotate the E dial to select the shutter speed. Press the Exposure Compensation button to toggle between the shutter speed and aperture settings, and rotate the E dial to select the aperture value. The next shooting mode is Manual, or M mode. This mode gives you complete control of the camera. In Manual mode, you will set both the shutter speed and aperture to create the exposure. To operate the camera in Manual mode, rotate the mode dial to M. To set the shutter speed, rotate the E dial. To set the aperture, press the Exposure Compensation button and rotate the E dial. As you're making adjustments to the aperture and shutter speed, you can watch the exposure scale either on the information display or through the viewfinder. When the exposure level indicator is near the center of the scale, the image should be properly exposed. You can choose just the right aperture and shutter speed combination for your scene, whether you want to freeze action or create a very shallow depth of field. Make the necessary adjustments to the aperture and shutter speed and press the shutter button halfway down to focus and the rest of the way down to take the picture. The next mode on the mode dial is Bulb mode. With the Bulb mode, you can create very long exposures for creative effect. With this mode, you'll want to make sure that you're using a tripod. and an optional remote will help reduce blur due to camera shake. To use the camera in bulb mode, rotate the mode dial to B. Then press the shutter button halfway to focus and press and hold it the rest of the way down to create the exposure. The shutter will remain open for as long as you hold the shutter button down completely. So if you want the shutter speed to last for 1 full minute, you'll need to hold the shutter button down for 1 minute. If you would prefer to press the shutter button once to open the shutter, and then once again to close the shutter and complete the exposure, you can select that setting in the menu system. Press the menu button and navigate to the first custom setting menu. Here, scroll to Bulb Mode Options and select Type 2. In addition to aperture and shutter speed, the camera's ISO setting will have a significant impact on whether your images are properly exposed. The ISO setting controls the image sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher the number, the less light that is required to properly expose the image sensor. You can either have the camera automatically choose the sensitivity or you can set it manually. To set the ISO on the KS1, press the ISO button and rotate the E dial to select the ISO. You can choose ISOs ranging from 100 to 51,200 in all of the shooting modes except manual, bulb, and sensitivity priority. You can also make adjustments to the auto ISO setting. With the auto ISO option, the setting that you choose will be the maximum ISO the camera will use. So if you set the auto ISO to 800, the camera will select an appropriate ISO setting between 100 and 800 to provide a properly exposed image. It's a good idea to set the ISO speed to suit the ambient light setting that you're shooting in. When you increase the ISO speed to a higher number for low light, a fast shutter speed can be used to avoid blurry images. The KS1's image sensor will allow you to use very high ISO settings and still have great images. Keep in mind, however, that some very high ISO settings will introduce digital noise or grain into your images. You'll want to experiment with the camera's ISO settings to become familiar with their range and control. Here's a guide that will help you have a basic idea of what ISO settings to use in various situations. When you're outdoors in full sun, use ISO 100 to 200. In the shade, on an overcast day, or indoors with lots of window light, use ISO 400. ISOs 800 and higher should be used indoors for action shots or in other low light conditions. Now that we've discussed shooting modes and ISO settings, let's take a minute to talk about the camera's drive modes. The drive modes determine how many times the shutter releases when you press the shutter button. The KS1 has single frame, continuous high and low speed, a 12-second and 2-second self-timer, remote control and delayed remote control, and exposure bracketing. To set the drive mode, simply press the drive mode button and use the E dial and 4-way controller to make your selection. In single frame drive mode, one picture will be taken when you press the shutter button completely. This is a good mode to use for stationary subjects. The continuous low speed drive mode will record images at a low rate of speed while the shutter button is pressed down completely. The continuous high-speed drive mode will record images at a high rate of speed while the shutter button is pressed down completely. The self-timer mode will take the picture either 12 or 2 seconds after the shutter button is pressed completely. Use this mode for self-portraits or with a tripod to reduce camera shake at very slow shutter speeds. The next drive mode is remote control. In this mode, the camera will be set to automatically communicate with an optional remote control. If you choose the 3-second delay remote mode, the camera will take the picture 3 seconds after the shutter button on the remote is pressed. The final drive mode is the exposure bracketing drive mode, where you can select the camera's bracketing settings. Highlight exposure bracketing from the drive mode options and press the down button on the 4-way controller. Now you can rotate the E dial to select the level of variation in exposure you'd like between the bracketed shots. The Pentax KS1 has two great features that you can use to capture great photos and amazing HD video. Let's discuss the camera's live view and movie modes. To shoot in live view, press the live view button. Please note that it's important to avoid directing the camera's lens toward the sun in live view and movie modes, as this can seriously damage the camera's internal components. In live view, you'll need to choose the camera's autofocus mode. To choose the AF mode, press the Info button to access the control panel. Here, select the autofocus option and press OK to view the settings. The first live view AF mode is face detection. When selected, face detection will automatically find and focus on faces in the frame. The next setting is face detection assist. This is a good mode to choose when you're facing the camera toward yourself to capture self-portraits. Next, there is tracking. When tracking is used, the camera will focus continually on moving subjects. To use this mode, align the small target frame with the subject that you'd like to focus on and press and hold the shutter button halfway down. The camera will maintain focus on the subject as it moves through the frame. To set the focus point back to the center, press the OK button. The next focus mode in live view is multiple AF points. With this mode, you can choose a specific area of the frame for the camera to use for focus. To do this, make sure multiple AF points is selected and press and hold the OK button. The focus point frame will appear on the LCD. You can rotate the E dial to choose the size of the area of focus points, and you can use the four-way controller to choose the area of the frame where you'd like the camera to focus. The next focus mode is Select, which will allow you to select the exact area of the frame that you'd like the camera to use for focus. With Select chosen for the focus mode, press and hold the OK button. You can use the four-way controller to choose the location of the focus point, and if you'd like to quickly set the focus point back to the center, press the green button. The final autofocus mode in live view is Spot. When selected, Spot will focus exclusively using the focus point at the center of the frame. In the default live view screen, several important shooting settings are displayed. Here, you'll see the shooting mode, the drive mode, the white balance setting, the custom image icon, the metering mode, the shake reduction indicator, and the battery indicator. At the bottom of the screen, there is the shutter speed, aperture setting, ISO setting, image file format, and the number of shots remaining. To hide these icons, press the Info button to toggle to the control panel, and press the Info button again to access the information display settings. Here you can choose No Information Display. In addition to live view, your KS1 is also capable of shooting high-quality HD video. When shooting movies, use a Speed Class 6 SD card or higher. If a slower memory card is used, the movie may not be properly recorded. When shooting movies or in live view, be sure that you do not point the lens directly into the sun, as it may damage the camera's components. Just like capturing still photos, you can set the camera to record video at different resolutions or frame sizes. The KS1 has two resolution settings, 1920 by 1080 and 1280 by 720. Both of these have several frame rate options. Choosing 24 frames per second will closely imitate the look that you would get if you were using a film video camera. 30 frames per second is more like what you would see on television. 60 frames per second is a good option for recording fast action video. The 25 and 50 frames per second options are PAL European equivalents to the 60 and 30 frames per second. The purpose or use of the finished video will help you decide which frame size and quality setting to use. Keep in mind that the higher the resolution, the larger the file sizes will be. The movie recording options, including frame size and quality, are available in the camera's movie menu under Movie Capture Settings. Recorded Pixels is where you can choose the movie resolution. Full HD is the 1920 by 1080 resolution, and it's the highest quality video your camera is capable of recording. The other setting, HD, is the 1280 by 720 resolution. This is a good setting to choose for family home movies or other scenarios when you don't need full HD resolution. The other option in movie capture settings is frame rate, which will simply allow you to select the frame rate. Frame rates will vary depending on the movie resolution you have selected. Recording movies with your KS1 is easy. To use the camera's movie mode, rotate the main switch to movie and select the shooting mode on the mode dial. Note that you can shoot movies with the camera's effect mode, and you can use the aperture priority, shutter and aperture priority, or manual modes if you'd like control over the exposure settings. Before recording, focus using the methods we've discussed for live view. Press the shutter button to start recording. Press the shutter button again to stop recording. To view a movie that you've recorded, press the playback button, and if necessary, scroll to the movie that you would like to play. Press the top button on the four-way controller to enter the movie playback. With the KS1, you can save one frame of a movie file as a JPEG to the memory card. To do this, simply enter the movie playback. At the frame that you'd like to save, press the top button on the four-way controller to pause the movie. Press the exposure compensation button to save the frame as a JPEG. Select Save and press OK. To record sound in movie mode, the KS1 has a built-in microphone, which will record sound automatically by default. If you'd like to change the microphone sensitivity or turn off sound recording, you can do this through the camera's menu system. In the movie menu, select Recording Sound Level. Here you can choose Auto, Manual, or Mute. When Manual is selected, the volume setting can be adjusted. The Pentax KS1 has a large LCD monitor where you can review images, adjust menu settings, and access the control panel. Let's discuss how to use these camera features. For basic playback of your images on the camera's LCD monitor, simply press the playback button. Then you can use the four-way controller to scroll through the images. If you have a large number of images recorded on the memory card, you may find that it's faster to find the photos that you'd like to view if you display multiple photos on the screen at once. To do this, simply rotate the E dial to the left. Rotating the dial once will display 12 thumbnail images, and rotating the dial a second time will display a folder view. You can rotate the E dial to the right or press the OK button to view an image full screen. You can also magnify images on the LCD monitor. This is especially useful when you want to check for good focus in detail areas of the photo. Rotate the E dial to the right once or multiple times to see the desired level of detail in the photo. Then you can use the four-way controller to scroll top to bottom and side to side on the photo. As you're scrolling through photos in the camera's playback, you may find some images that you would like to protect from being accidentally erased. To protect an image, press the bottom button on the four-way controller. Scroll to Protect and choose Select Images. Use the four-way controller to scroll through the image thumbnails and press the OK button to select any images that you'd like to be protected. When you're finished making your selections, press the Info button and select Protect. Now, a small key icon will appear on the LCD to indicate that the image is protected. If you find a photo that didn't turn out, you can delete it from your memory card by pressing the Delete button. When the dialog appears, select Delete, press OK, and the image will be removed from the memory card. Note that once an image is erased, it cannot be recovered. Now let's take a look at the first and default playback screen, which is called the Standard Information Display. This screen shows some important information about the image. First, there is the folder name, file name, image file format, shutter speed, aperture, ISO setting, and exposure compensation. To view additional playback displays, press the Info button and use the four-way controller to select a different information display. The next information display is the Detailed Information Display. In this display, you'll see the image thumbnail, the shooting mode, the folder number and file number, the drive mode, the shutter speed, aperture and ISO settings, the shake reduction indicator, the exposure compensation setting, the metering mode and focus mode, the white balance setting, the focal length, the file format, JPEG recorded pixels and JPEG quality, the highlight and shadow correction, the lateral chromatic aberration adjustment, the diffraction correction, the color space, the date and time that the image was recorded. On the right side of the screen, you'll also see the custom image setting and all of the custom image parameters. To view the next playback display, press the Info button and use the four-way controller to select the histogram display. In this display, a histogram is shown at the bottom of the screen. The histogram gives a basic idea of the tone distribution of an image. If the histogram is shifted to the left side of the graph, the image will probably be dark or underexposed. If the histogram is shifted to the right side of the graph, the image will be too bright or overexposed. In most cases, a properly exposed photo will have data distributed in the center of the graph or over the whole graph. The histogram will help you have a basic idea of the overall exposure of your image when you're outdoors in bright sunlight and the photos are difficult to see on the LCD monitor. The next playback display is the RGB histogram display. To view this display from the exposure histogram display, you can press the top or bottom buttons on the four-way controller. In addition to the overall histogram, this screen shows a histogram for each of the red, green, and blue channels of the image. Here you can see any of the areas in the individual channels that are shifted to the left, showing the dark tones in that channel, or shifted to the right, showing the lighter tones in that color channel. If any of the channels have distribution that is shifted too far to the right, that color channel will be oversaturated and show little or no detail. To view the last playback display, press the Info button and use the four-way controller to select the No Information Display. This is simply a full screen view of the image. Within the playback mode, there are several functions that can be accessed when the bottom button on the four-way controller is pressed. These options are the playback mode palette items. The first option is image rotation. To view the options, press OK. You can select the direction you'd like to rotate the image and press OK to save changes. Next, there is digital filter with a variety of options for processing the image in camera. For each of these filter options, you can make adjustments to the filter by pressing the Info button, and you can save changes by pressing the OK button. You can choose from Base Parameter Adjustment, Extract Color, Replace Color, Toy Camera, Retro, High Contrast, Shading, Invert Color, Unicolor Bold, Bold Monochrome, Tone Expansion, Sketch, Watercolor, Pastel, Posterization, Miniature, Soft, Starburst, Fisheye, Slim, and Monochrome. The next option is Color Moire Correction, where you can reduce the effect of color moire patterns that are sometimes visible in images that include repetitive dots or lines. Next, there is Resize, which will allow you to reduce the resolution of the image and save a new copy to the memory card. Cropping is next. With this option, you can rotate the E dial to adjust the size of the crop, use the four-way controller to set the location of the crop, and press the Info button to select the aspect ratio and rotation. The next option is Protect, which will allow you to select images to be protected from accidental deletion. Next, there is Slideshow, which will simply allow you to play a slideshow of the images on the memory card. Save as manual white balance is next. With this option, you can use the white balance information from the captured image to create a custom white balance setting. Next, there is Save as cross-processing, which will allow you to save the settings that were used for an image captured in the cross-processing mode as a favorite setting. The next option is Raw Development, which will allow you to process a raw image and save a JPEG copy to the memory card. Movie Edit is next. With this option, you can divide the movie into clips, or you can delete unwanted portions of a movie clip. The last Playback Mode palette item is iFi Image Transfer, which will allow you to transfer images wirelessly with an optional iFi memory card. Let's discuss the focus modes that are available on the KS1. The Pentax KS1 has a sophisticated autofocus system with a variety of autofocus modes and areas that, when used well together, will help you get great focus regardless of what type of subject you're photographing. Understanding how all of the modes and areas work together might seem a little confusing, but this chapter of the guide will help you know when to use each autofocus mode as well as each autofocus area mode. Note that the focus modes can be changed only in certain shooting modes. To choose an autofocus mode on the KS1, make sure that the focus mode switch is set to AF. Then press the Info button. Use the 4-way controller to highlight the focus mode option. Here you can rotate the E dial to make your selection, or you can press OK to view the options. You can choose from AFA or Auto Select mode, AFS or Single mode, and AFC or Continuous mode. The main thing you want to think about when you're deciding which autofocus mode to use is whether or not your subject is in motion. AFS or Single mode is intended for use with stationary subjects. In this mode, the focus is locked when the AF/AEL button is pressed or when the shutter button is pressed halfway. This would be a good mode to choose if you're photographing products or doing portrait work with an older child or adult. AFC or Continuous mode is the mode that you would want to choose for photographing moving subjects. In this mode, the camera will focus continually while the AF/AEL button is pressed or the shutter button is pressed halfway. This mode is great if you're photographing a sporting event, small children, or animals. In AFA or Auto Select mode, the camera will automatically decide whether to use the Single mode or the Continuous mode depending on whether or not the subject is in motion. In this mode, the camera will switch from single to continuous servo automatically if a still subject starts moving. The last of the focusing modes is the manual focus or MF mode. To use manual focus, simply switch the focus mode switches on the camera body and lens to MF. This gives you control to manually focus on any subject through the viewfinder by using the focus ring. Before we begin discussing the focusing areas, please note that autofocus modes and focusing areas are different settings but function together. Understanding how they work together will help your images have great focus. There are 5 basic focusing area settings: Auto, 11 AF points; Auto, 5 AF points; Select, Expanded Area AF, and Spot. To select the focusing area, press the Info button and use the 4-way controller to select the AF Active Area setting. Here you can choose one of the focusing area options. The first focusing area setting is Auto with 11 AF points. With this option, the camera will automatically select the focus area with all 11 focus points. The next option is Auto with 5 AF points. With this option, the camera will automatically select the focus area using 5 of the AF points. Next, there is Select, which will allow you to choose the exact focus point that you'd like the camera to use. This is a good mode to choose for portrait work or stationary objects. After you've chosen Select for the focusing area, the camera will automatically enable the four-way controller to choose the focus point. Simply use the top, bottom, and side buttons to choose the focus point that you'd like the camera to use. To toggle between focus point selection and the additional functions of the four-way controller buttons, press and hold the OK button. The next option is Expanded Area AF. This is a good mode to choose for moving subjects. With Expanded Area AF, you will choose the focus point that you'd like the camera to use, and the camera will use the surrounding AF points for backup if the subject moves from the original focus point. To use this mode, make sure that it is selected in the control panel. Then use the four-way controller to choose the primary AF point. The point that is shown in red on the LCD and in the viewfinder is the point the camera will use first. The surrounding AF points, shown in pink, are the AF points that will be used as backup if the subject moves away from the primary AF point. The final focusing area is Spot. With this option, the camera will exclusively use the center AF point for focus. If you'd like to use this setting with off-center subjects, you can position the subject in the center of the frame, press and hold the AF AEL button or the shutter button halfway to focus, and keep the button held down while you recompose the image. Then simply press the shutter button completely to take the picture. Sometimes a photo may have poor focus, but it's not related to the camera's focus mode or focusing area. Camera shake happens when the camera moves while the shutter is open, exposing the image sensor. Always try to steady the camera. Holding it with two hands and pressing the viewfinder gently against your face will help. You can also lean against something or use a tripod, a monopod, or even a beanbag to steady the camera. You can also reduce the effect of camera shake by selecting a fast shutter speed. This reduces the amount of time the image sensor is exposed to shaky conditions. A helpful rule of thumb is to set the shutter speed to 1 over the focal length. Confusing? Let me explain. If the focal length on your lens is 300 millimeters, for example, you should set your shutter speed to at least 1/300th of a second. If the focal length is 80 millimeters, you might get by using a shutter speed as low as 1/80th of a second. Generally speaking, a tripod is a good idea anytime the shutter speed is slower than 1/60th of a second, regardless of the focal length of the lens. Let's take a look at the KS1's sophisticated menu system. To access the menu, simply press the menu button. There are 5 different menus, including the Record menu, Movie, Playback, Setup, and Custom Settings. Many of these settings are discussed in greater detail in other chapters of this guide. We'll just look at an overview of the menu items in this chapter. Note that the menu items may vary depending on the shooting mode that you have selected. We'll be looking at the menu items that are available when the camera is set to the program mode. Let's first take a look at each of the items in the camera's Record menus. The first item in the first menu is Custom Image, where you can make adjustments to many of the parameters like color and contrast. Next, there is Image Capture Settings, where you can choose the image file format, resolution, and quality. AF Settings is next. With this option, you can choose the AF mode, focusing area, and enable or disable the AF Assist light. Next, there is AE Metering, where you can simply choose the camera's metering mode. Digital Filter is next. With this option, you can apply one of the camera's digital filters to the images. Next, there is HDR Capture, which will allow you to configure the camera to take HDR images. The second Record mode menu begins with Lens Correction, which will allow you to enable or disable the lens correction feature for distortion, lateral chromatic aberration, peripheral illumination, and diffraction. Next, there is Dynamic Range Settings with options for highlight and shadow correction. When enabled, the highlight and shadow correction options will improve the detail in highlight and shadow areas of an image. High ISO noise reduction is next. With this option, you can choose the level of noise reduction for images taken at high ISO settings. Next, there is slow shutter speed noise reduction, where you can choose the level of noise reduction for images taken at very slow shutter speeds. The next option is GPS, which will allow you to configure the camera for use with an optional GPS unit. The third record mode menu begins with Live View, where you can adjust settings for the autofocus, focus peaking, grid display, histogram display, and highlight alert. Next, there is Anti-Aliasing Filter Simulator, which will allow you to enable or disable a simulated low-pass filter to reduce the moire effect. Type 1 will balance resolution and moire reduction, and Type 2 will prioritize moire reduction. The last option is bracketing, which will capture 3 images each time the shutter button is pressed. The first image will have the anti-aliasing filter simulator set to off, the second will be set to Type 1, and the third will be set to Type 2. The next option is shake reduction, where you can enable or disable the camera's shake reduction feature. Next, there is input focal length, which will allow you to enter the focal length when an older style lens is used. The fourth record mode menu begins with Instant Review, where you can choose how long you'd like the camera to display an image on the LCD immediately after it's taken. Next, there is Button Customization, where you can set custom functions for the AF/AEL button, the green button, and the E-dial. The last option in the record mode menu is Memory. With this option, you can choose which settings you'd like the camera to save when it's powered off. Now let's take a look at each of the items available in the camera's movie menu. First, there is Movie Capture Settings, where you can select the movie resolution and frame rate. Next, there is Recording Sound Level, where you can adjust the built-in microphone settings. Next, there is Digital Filter, which will allow you to apply a digital filter to your movies. The final option in the movie menu is Movie Shake Reduction, which will allow you to enable or disable shake reduction for movie mode. The next menu item on the KS1 is the Playback menu. The first option is Slideshow, which will allow you to set up the camera to play a slideshow of the images and movies on the memory card. Next, there is Quick Zoom, which will allow you to choose the initial level of magnification when you're zooming in on images in playback. Highlight Alert is next. When enabled, Highlight Alert will cause the very overexposed areas of the image to blink in black in playback mode. Next, there is Auto Image Rotation. When enabled, Auto Image Rotation will rotate the images that were captured in a vertical orientation. The next two options are Protect All Images and Delete All Images, which will simply allow you to protect or delete all the images on the memory card. The next menus are the setup menus. The first item in the first setup menu is Language, where you can select the language for the menus and displays. Next, there is Date Adjustment, where you can set the date format as well as the date and time for the camera's internal clock. World Time is next, where you can choose either a home destination or a travel destination and set the time zone for each. Text Size is next. You can choose from standard or large for the text size for the menus and displays. Next, there is Sound Effects, where you can set the volume for the camera's beep sounds, as well as choose the items that you'd like to have the beep sound for. LCD Displays is next. With this option, you can choose to enable or disable a guide display. You can choose one of 12 different color options. Next, there is Display Settings, where you can adjust the monitor brightness, saturation, and color tones. The second setup menu begins with USB connection, where you can choose the USB connection mode. The HDMI option is where you can choose the resolution to be used when your camera is connected to an HD television. With folder name, you can customize the image folder names. Next, there is Create New Folder, which will allow you to make a new image folder on the memory card. Under File Name, you can customize the file names for image files. The next option is File Number. If you choose Sequential Numbering, the image file numbering will continue in sequential order when a new folder is created. If you choose Reset, the file numbering will be reset to 0001 each time a new folder is created. Next, there is Copyright Information, which will allow you to embed copyright information in the EXIF data for the image files. The third setup menu begins with Flicker Reduction. Flicker Reduction is good to use when you're shooting in live view or movie mode under fluorescent or mercury vapor lights. You'll want the setting to match the local AC power supply. Next, there is Auto Power Off, where you can choose how long you'd like the camera to wait before automatically powering off when not in use. The next option is Indicator Lamps, where you can make adjustments to the main switch lamp, the grip lamps, the self-timer lamp, and the remote control lamp. Wireless memory card is next. With this option, you can configure the camera to use an optional iFi memory card. Next, there is Reset, which will simply allow you to reset the settings to factory default. The fourth setup menu begins with Pixel Mapping, which will allow you to map and correct any defective pixels on the image sensor. Next, there is Dust Removal, which will allow you to automatically clean the image sensor. The next option is Sensor Cleaning, which will lock the mirror up so you can manually clean the image sensor with a blower tool. Format is next, which will simply allow you to format the memory card. The final option in the setup menu is Firmware Info Options, where you can view the camera's current firmware version. The next menus are the Custom Settings menus, where you can customize many of the camera's options. The first item is EV Steps, which will allow you to choose the adjustment steps for the exposure settings. Sensitivity Steps will allow you to choose the adjustment steps for ISO sensitivity. Meter Operating Time will allow you to choose how long you'd like the exposure meter to remain active. AEL with AF Locked will allow you to choose whether or not you'd like to lock the exposure automatically when the focus is locked. Link AE and AF Point is next. With this option, you can choose whether or not you'd like to link the exposure and AF point in the focusing area. Auto EV Compensation will allow you to choose whether to automatically compensate when a proper exposure cannot be obtained. Next, there is Bulb Mode Options, where you can choose how you'd like the camera to function with bulb exposure mode. The second custom setting menu begins with Bracketing Order, where you can choose the order you'd like bracketed images to be recorded in. One push bracketing is next. With this option, you can choose whether or not you'd like all 3 bracketed frames to be recorded at once when the shutter button is pressed. Next, there is White Balance Adjustable Range, where you can choose whether or not to automatically fine-tune the white balance. White balance when using flash is next. With this option, you can set the white balance for using flash. Next, there is Auto White Balance in Tungsten Light, where you can choose whether you'd like to automatically apply a subtle or a strong correction. Next, there is Color Temperature Steps, where you can set the adjustment steps for color temperature. Superimpose AF Area is next. With this option, you can set whether or not to display the active AF point in red in the viewfinder. The third custom setting menu begins with AFS Setting. With this option, you can choose whether focus or release is the priority when the camera is using the single AF mode. If you choose Release, the camera will allow the shutter to release even if focus has not been achieved. If you choose Focus, the camera will not allow a picture to be taken if focus has not been achieved. Next, there is First Frame Action in AFC, with options for Release Priority, Auto, and Focus Priority. The next option is Action in AFC Continuous Shooting, which has options for Focus Priority, Auto, and Frames per Second Priority. Next, there is Hold AF Status, where you can choose whether you'd like the camera to maintain focus for a length of time when the subject happens to move out of the focusing area after being focused. Next, there is Autofocus with Remote Control. With this option, you can choose whether to use autofocus when you're using an optional remote control. Release while charging is next. With this option, you can set whether or not you'd like the camera to be able to take pictures while the built-in flash is charging. Color space is next, with options for sRGB and Adobe RGB. Some photographers prefer the sRGB mode as it requires less processing later. Other photographers prefer the Adobe RGB mode as this mode has a wider range of colors, making it a preferred option for images that will be extensively processed on the computer. The fourth custom settings menu begins with Save Rotation Info, where you can choose whether or not you'd like the rotation information to be saved when you're shooting. Next, there is Save Menu Location. If you choose Reset Menu Location, the first menu tab will be accessed when the menu button is pressed. If you choose Save Menu Location, the last menu tab will be accessed when the menu button is pressed. The next option is Catch in Focus, which is available when a manual focus lens is attached to the camera. When enabled, Catch in Focus will automatically take the picture when the subject comes into focus. Next, there is AF Fine Adjustment, which will allow you to fine-tune focus for specific lenses. The next option is Using Aperture Ring, which will allow you to enable or disable the shutter release when the lens aperture ring is set to a position other than A. The final item in the custom setting menu is Reset Custom Functions, which will allow you to reset all of the custom setting menu items to factory default. The Pentax KS1 includes several features that will allow you to fine-tune and enhance the color and tone of your images, as well as apply creative effects. In this chapter, we'll discuss white balance, custom image settings, and highlight and shadow control. White balance is determined by the color temperature of light sources, which is measured in degrees Kelvin. The higher color temperatures, measured in the area of 5600 Kelvin to 7500 Kelvin, represent situations like a sunlit or cloudy day. These shooting situations have a greater amount of blue tones and a lesser amount of red tones. Lower color temperature situations are measured in the area of 800 Kelvin down to 1900 Kelvin and are found in lighting situations like standard lighting from a tungsten light bulb or candlelight. These types of shooting situations are found on the lower end of the spectrum and produce greater amounts of red tones and lesser amounts of blue tones. To access the white balance settings, simply press the white balance button. The first option is Auto White Balance. With this setting, the camera will automatically adjust the color temperature. The Auto White Balance setting has two different options: the Standard Auto White Balance and the Multi-Auto White Balance. Select the Multi setting if you're shooting in areas with multiple light sources. The next white balance setting is Daylight. Daylight is a great setting for taking pictures in the sunlight. This setting is marked with a sun icon. Use the Shade setting when you're taking pictures in the shade. It reduces the bluish tones in a picture. This setting is marked with an icon of a house with shade. Use the Cloudy setting when taking pictures on days that are overcast. This is marked with a cloud icon. The Fluorescent Light setting is great for taking pictures under fluorescent lighting. With the KS1, you can choose one of 4 different fluorescent white balance options, depending on the type of fluorescent light that you're shooting under. The next white balance setting is tungsten. This is a good setting to use when you're shooting pictures under common light bulbs. It reduces the reddish tones in a picture. This setting is marked with a light bulb icon. The next setting is the flash setting. Use this setting when you're using the built-in or an external flash unit. Next is color temperature enhancement. When this setting is selected, the camera will detect a predominant color in the scene and enhance it. This is a good setting to use for photographing colorful clouds or sunsets. The next white balance setting is manual white balance. Use this setting when you want to create a custom white balance setting for a specific light source for the best accuracy. To create a custom white balance setting, make sure that the manual white balance is selected for the white balance setting. Then, fill the frame with a white object and press the shutter button completely. Press OK to save the white balance reading as your custom white balance, or press the menu button to cancel. The last white balance setting is color temperature, and it's marked with a K icon. Use this setting when you know the color temperature of the lighting that you're shooting under. To set the color temperature, press the info button and rotate the E dial to make your selection. You can fine-tune any of these white balance settings to increase the green, amber, magenta, or blue tones, depending on your lighting conditions. To fine-tune, simply press the info button and use the 4-way controller to place the cursor toward the color that you'd like to increase. When you're finished, press OK. If you'd like to cancel the adjustment, press the menu button. In addition to white balance, custom image settings can improve the quality of your images. This feature will allow you to customize the look of your image. The custom image settings on the KS1 are easily accessed in the control panel by pressing the info button. Here, select Custom Image and press OK to view the options. There are 11 different settings to choose from. Each of these custom image settings can be customized by simply pressing the info button. Parameters specific to that setting will be shown, and you can use the 4-way controller and E-dial to make adjustments. The first and default setting is bright. This option offers standard processing and balanced results. This is a good setting to choose for general picture taking. Next, there is the natural setting, which is a good setting to choose if you wish to process your images with your computer. Colors with this custom image setting are natural and subdued. The portrait setting is great for portraits. It offers pleasant skin tones and textures. The landscape setting is good for taking pictures of scenery or cities outdoors. The vibrant setting will make colors appear bright and rich. The radiant setting is great for images with primary colors that you'd like emphasized. The muted setting will capture images that appear to be filled with light. Next, there is bleach bypass, which will capture images with a high contrast and low saturation. The next option is reversal film. This setting mimics the rich look of film photos. The monochrome setting is useful when you would like to take black and white photographs. Note, images taken with this setting cannot be converted to color later. Next, there is cross-processing, which will give your images a dramatic look with pronounced colors. You can press the info button to choose a color tone. The KS1 has a feature called Dynamic Range. When enabled, this feature will preserve detail in highlight and shadow areas of images with high contrast. The Dynamic Range options are available in the control panel under Highlight Correction and Shadow Correction. For highlight correction, you can choose from Auto, On, or Off. For shadow correction, you can choose from Auto, Low, Medium, High, or Off. Your KS1 has a powerful built-in flash that can provide you with extra light in certain shooting scenarios. The effective range of the built-in flash is between 2 and 30 feet, depending on the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. As a general rule, you'll want to keep your subject within about 3.5 to 20 feet for the best results. To use the built-in flash, simply press the flash pop-up button and the flash will pop up. To select the flash mode, press the flash button on the 4-way controller. To adjust the flash compensation, press the bottom button on the 4-way controller and rotate the E dial to make adjustments. Values with a plus sign will increase the brightness of the flash, and values with a minus sign will decrease the brightness of the flash. The first flash mode is flash on. This mode is a good general use flash mode. The camera will calculate how much light is needed, and the flash will provide that light. The next flash mode is flash on plus red eye reduction. This mode is good to use when you're photographing people or pets. In this mode, a tiny pre-flash will fire, which causes the size of the person's pupils to shrink, lessening the effect of red eye in the photo. Because the photo is not taken immediately when the shutter button is pressed, you'll want to avoid using this mode with moving subjects. The next flash mode is slow speed sync mode. This flash mode is a good mode to use when you're photographing a subject at night and you would like to have the background and the subject properly exposed. It's a good idea to use a tripod with this mode to minimize blur due to camera shake. The third flash mode is slow speed sync plus red eye. In this mode, the flash will combine the red eye reduction function with the slow speed sync mode. Use this mode for night portraits when you would like the background to be properly exposed and you would like to minimize the effects of red eyes. Again, the use of a tripod will help minimize blur. The next flash mode is trailing curtain sync. In this mode, the flash fires just before the shutter closes, which will create a stream of light behind light sources. The subject will be properly exposed. Using a tripod is recommended to minimize blur due to camera shake. The last flash mode is manual flash discharge, which will allow you to manually choose a flash output power. You can choose options ranging from full down to 1/128th power. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about your Pentax KS1. We know this new information will give you enough confidence and know-how to get the most out of your camera. Remember, you can refer back to any section of this guide at any time. Just select the topics that you want to review from the main menu. Watch for more QuickPro guides on using newly released cameras. Thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about your Pentax K1S. We know this new information, KS1. Okay. I hate when I do that, right at the very end. You know, okay. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about your Canon 5D. We know this new information will give you, sorry.